All right, so today we're diving into the case of Vernon Lee Clark, a name that might send chills down the spines of anyone familiar with Baltimore. And, you've done some digging into his life and crime, so I think you're ready for, well, a pretty unsettling story.
Yeah, Vernon Lee Clark's case, it is definitely dark and complex. The serial killer, I mean, he terrorized Baltimore for almost a decade, from 1980 to 89,
Yeah.
left a lasting mark.
And to think, DNA profiling, which was brand new then, was what finally caught him, really shows you how science can change everything in investigations.
What's so interesting about Clark's story is how it all unfolds. It's like a puzzle. And his early life gives us some of those first pieces, born in 55 in Elkridge, Maryland. But his childhood, his teen years, they were troubled. Lots of run-ins with the law, actually.
Yeah, the research shows a pattern of escalating criminal behavior, drug possession, burglary, even assault.
hmm
Makes you wonder, could those early offenses have been like a warning sign, maybe a missed chance to intervene?
That's a question criminologists wrestle with all the time. I mean, could things have been different? Could those early crimes have been addressed and maybe changed his path, prevented what came later? It's something to think about as we go deeper into his story.
For sure. It's like he was on this path towards darkness. But there were moments that seemed, well, normal. He had jobs, an animal skinner, a
Yeah.
day laborer. He even worked at CNS Faulkner Inc. for a bit.
Right, the Faulkner connection. That becomes really significant as we go through his crimes. It's something we'll definitely come back to later.
We will. But first, we need to face the reality of his crimes, starting with his first known victim, Rebecca, or Dolly, Davis.
So Davis was 70 years old from Elkridge. She had this full life, Bryn Mawr graduate, former art teacher. But Vernon Lee Clark took all that away in 1980.
The brutality of it all, the way he hit her body, it's terrifying. It really is. And that's when the community, they started to feel unsafe. The sources mention women installing deadbolt locks out of fear.
Can you imagine living with that? Knowing a killer was out there, that kind of fear, the impact of that, it's huge. It shows how serial killers, they don't just kill individuals, they terrorize entire communities.
Absolutely. And tragically, Davis wasn't his only victim. His violence continued, and over the next few years, he claimed more lives.
Right. In 81, Evelyn Dieterich, she was 68, might have had a handyman connection to Clark. Then, 84, Iva Myrtle Watson, 81 years old, chased down and beaten to death.
And in 1989, Kathleen Golden, only 23 years old, shot with a borrowed shotgun. Each life lost, each case just devastating for the community. And it shows just how much his depravity was escalating.
Yeah, each case, while part of Clark's larger story, each one is its own tragedy. These weren't just numbers, these were people, each with their own lives, hopes, dreams, and Clark took all that away.
So how did they finally catch him after all this?
Something you wouldn't even think about, a discarded pizza box. That's what gave them their first real lead.
A pizza box. That seems, I don't know, almost too simple for such a big case.
Right. But that everyday item, that's what linked Clark to Goulden. Investigators also had a semen sample from the scene. But DNA technology back then, it wasn't as advanced as it is now.
So even with that, even with the evidence, the investigation was held back by the limits of the technology.
Exactly. They were building a case, but they needed that undeniable proof that DNA analysis could give them. But then you could say fate intervened. Or maybe it was just Clark's impulsiveness. While he was under suspicion for Goulden's murder, he assaulted some police officers when they were trying to serve a search warrant.
So he ends up in jail,
hmm
and that's when they got what they needed to connect him to the crime, for sure. A DNA sample.
His own actions, they were his downfall. You see that a lot in these cases.
It seems like the community, they were desperate for answers, for justice. They played a big part in pushing the investigation forward, too.
Oh, absolutely. There was a $6,000 reward offered. That probably encouraged people to come forward. They wanted this case solved. They wanted to feel safe again and to get justice.
And finally, in 1990, it seemed like justice was served. The DNA match confirmed it. Vernon Lee Clark was guilty of these horrific crimes. It was a win for forensic science and a big step towards healing for the community. But is that the end of the story?
Well, not exactly. Clark's arrest, that was just the start of a long and, let me tell you, complicated legal battle.
Yeah.
And, it's a battle where the power of DNA technology, it really comes into play.
We left off with Clark's arrest in 1990, a big moment for sure. Yeah. But that was just the beginning, right? The beginning of the road to justice. So what happened next?
Well, His trial, it wasn't simple. Clark, he tried a few different things, claimed he was using drugs, said there was racial bias in his arrest. He even said he was with prostitutes the night Kathleen Golden was murdered.
Hmm. What do you think about those defenses? Was he just, I don't know, trying to get away with it? Or was there something more to it?
You know, we can't really speculate on his motives, but the prosecution, they had a strong case, especially with the DNA evidence. That was pretty undeniable. But there was some controversy during the trial. Golden's mother, she wasn't allowed in the courtroom because of a what they call a sequestration order.
Sequestration order.
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with that. Could you explain what that is and why it was used in this case?
Sure. It's a legal thing. Basically, it's meant to stop witnesses from influencing each other's testimony. In this case, the judge thought Golden's mother might be called as a witness. So if she was in the courtroom, it could have, unintentionally affected what other people said.
Right. That makes sense legally.
Hmm.
But wow, I can only imagine how hard that must have been for her, not being there at such an important moment, in getting justice for her daughter.
It's definitely a tough situation. It shows how complicated and sometimes even painful the legal system can be for those seeking justice.
So with all the legal stuff and Clark trying to defend himself, what was the verdict in the end?
The jury, they found Clark guilty of murder, and in '91, he was sentenced to life in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Remember how we talked about DNA technology being so new back then? Well, as it advanced, it brought even more to light.
It's like science was catching up, alongside the search for justice.
Exactly. So in 1999, with the new DNA testing, investigators, they were able to connect Clark to the murder of Rebecca Davis, his first known victim. This led to more life sentences, really holding him accountable for all the terror he caused.
Like science was slowly but surely tightening the net around him.
And hold on, there's more. 2015, another breakthrough. DNA evidence linked Clark to Iva Watson's murder. Another life sentence. It just goes to show the pursuit of justice, it doesn't stop, even decades later.
Clark's case, it's really a powerful example of how DNA technology has changed criminal justice. It's amazing how something as small as a pizza box or a semen sample can solve a complex case years, even decades later.
Yeah, Clark's case, it was a big turning point for using DNA technology. But to really understand the impact, we got to step back and look at the bigger picture, how it all developed. Back in the '80s, DNA profiling was just starting out. It was revolutionary, but it had its limits.
What were some of the challenges back then when it came to DNA analysis, I mean?
Well, one of the biggest things was time. Processing a sample, it could take months, sometimes even longer. And they needed a lot of DNA to do the analysis, so it was hard to use with degraded samples or if there wasn't much to begin with.
So it was a powerful tool, but still kind of under development.
Exactly. Fast forward to now, things like polymerase chain reaction, PCR, they've totally changed DNA analysis. We get results in days now, even from tiny degraded samples.
That's incredible. Getting results so much faster, that must have had a huge impact on investigations.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about speed. It's also helped reopen cold cases, finally getting justice for victims and their families.
It really shows how dedicated scientists and forensic experts are. They never stop trying to improve these technologies.
And it's more than just speed and efficiency. We have DNA databases now. These databases, they have tons of DNA profiles. So investigators, they can search for matches even across different places, even internationally. It can connect crimes that might have stayed separate otherwise.
It's like casting a wider net, connecting the dots on a much bigger scale.
Exactly. And it's not just solving crimes. DNA technology, it can also clear people who were wrongly accused. So many people have been freed from prison because DNA proved they were innocent.
Like a safety net for the justice system, making sure the guilty are punished and the innocent are set free.
It's a great example of how science can be used for justice and fairness.
Vernon Lee Clark's case and the whole development of DNA technology, it's a fascinating look at how criminal justice is always changing. It reminds us that science is essential in finding the truth and holding people accountable. But there's still one loose end, something we keep coming back to.
Right, the Faulkner murders and whether Clark was involved, that's been kind of underlying our whole conversation, and it needs a closer look.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I want to focus as we go into the last part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot with Vernon Lee Clark, his crimes, the path to justice, and how DNA technology changed everything. But there's this one thing we keep coming back to, It's like a connection to something, even before his known violence. The murders of Carvel and Sarah Faulkner in 1979.
Right. It's been there in the background the whole time, and it definitely needs more attention. You remember how Clark worked at CNS Faulkner Inc.? Well, that was Carvel and Sarah Faulkner's company.
So he knew them. That can't just be a coincidence. What else can you tell me about their murders? What happened?
It's tough because the information on the Faulkner case, it's limited, especially in what you've found. We know they were killed in their home in April '79, almost a year before Rebecca Davis, who we think was Clark's first victim.
Killed in their home. That makes me think maybe the killer was someone they knew, someone they trusted enough to let in.
You're right. That's something you see a lot with serial killers. They often target people they know, people who might, let their guard down around them.
And if Clark was working for them, he would have had access to their house, known their routines, maybe even what they were vulnerable to.
It's circumstantial, but yeah, it kind of fits together in a disturbing way.
Given all that and how the Faulkner murders happened before the others we know about, it makes you wonder, could this have been his first time, his first step into becoming a serial killer?
I'm sure investigators have thought about that too. If Clark did kill the Faulkners, it changes how we see his whole criminal history. It pushes back the start of his reign of terror.
So why haven't they charged him with those murders then? What's stopping them?
The biggest thing is probably evidence or lack of it. Remember, this was 1979. DNA technology wasn't really used back then.
So maybe they suspect him, but they just don't have enough solid proof to actually make a case.
Could be. But even without charges, it doesn't mean the case is closed. Cold cases, they stay open, waiting for new leads, new technology, or maybe even someone coming forward with new information.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Mhm.
You can see the outline, you can see how things might connect, but without those pieces, you can't see the whole picture.
And with the Faulkner murders, that missing piece might be Vernon Lee Clark. Will we ever know for sure? That's still to be determined.
This deep dive into Vernon Lee Clark, it's taken us through a dark part of true crime. It shows how complicated people are, how violence affects communities, and how science helps us find justice. We started with one man, but we've talked about so much more. How trauma lasts, the constant search for answers, and how technology can uncover the truth even after so long.
It's been a fascinating look, that's for sure. We may never have all the answers, especially about the Faulkners. But Clark's story reminds us there are still mysteries out there, waiting to be solved.
And for our listeners, if you're interested in unsolved mysteries and how forensic science works, I really suggest you look into the Faulkner case and Clark's connection to it. It's worth digging into. Until next time, stay curious and keep those questions coming,